Talk about it. Tell me about it. Tell me.
Well,
Tell
I
me.
don't know. Like earlier that day too, I watched Tangerine for the first time, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Never seen it, and I thought it was pretty good. And then we went and just saw Anora. I'm glad I saw Tangerine before we saw Anora actually, because there were some like kind of similarities.
Hmm.
Anora is about like a sex worker. She's like a
Hmm.
stripper, and she also, is paid for sex. Played by Mikey Madison, which people really love. Yeah, I think rightfully people, love her performance and everything. And, I thought she was good and, she really did her best. And she meets this very rich Russian guy who's like a teenage boy essentially. And they kind of like get married and all this stuff. And it kind of causes problems for his family. It was a good movie. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was funny. Sean Baker, of course, is very interested in like sex work. That seems to be like
Hmm.
a commonality. There's, in Tangerine, the main characters are sex workers.
Yeah, even in
Um,
Florida Project, there's references, suggestions.
I haven't seen that one, but I'll get around to it. Anora's good. I think it's worth seeing in the theaters. It's a solid film. But man, like Red Rocket for me, like that's so far, that is the best Sean Baker movie. I fucking love Red Rocket for a lot of different reasons. And Honora is a good example as to why I like it the most. Like Honora, the character, is a good character, but it's one of those characters where it's like she can like do no wrong.
Okay.
Obviously it's a very good, empowering character, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone loves that character and people can identify with it. And I'm not trying to like cheapen it or anything,
Hmm.
obviously. But I love Red Rocket because I think a more challenging film. It's a funnier film because the Simon Rex character and performance, I think, is a lot more interesting and better because he's like a terribly complicated character because he's like a straight up terrible person. He does like terrible things in order to just ingratiate himself. Like he's
Hmm.
totally selfish. He's totally just like a terrible person throughout the film. And I find that a lot more interesting than the central Anora character in the movie. Still a great character, still a great performance. She's funny. You feel bad for her throughout. She's very, very strong. There's this very great scene in the movie where I'm not like trying to like, she's staying at her boyfriend's house, her husband or whatever, the Russian kid, and these guys break into it. Not to like do anything nefarious, but they're basically his babysitters, and they
Hmm.
break into the house, and there's like this like huge fight, and like that part of the movie is really funny and crazy and nuts and chaotic. And it's really quite fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot of like really great stuff like that. And the movie after that scene spirals and spirals and it's very, very fun. The ending kind of goes on for a while. Didn't really care for that. But again, for me, Red Rocket, that is like the best Sean Baker movie that I've seen. It's fantastic. It's funny. It's more challenging. I like the location a lot better. Anora primarily takes place in New York City.
Where does
I
Red Rocket
forget.
take place? Is it in like the
I
deep South?
it takes place in the middle of nowhere, Texas.
Okay.
Wherever they live is like the ugliest place you've ever seen. Like people live in like really small homes in like trailer parks and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
like they're surrounded by what appears to be like electrical infrastructure, right? Of
Hmm.
like kind of like power plants and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
like ugly. There's no like really like tall buildings or grassy fields or trees or anything like that. The location is just like really, really ugly and feels really real. And in Enora, they're just kind of like driving around New York City to different locations. A couple times in the movie, they go to Las Vegas, which is fine. Again, I just think Red Rocket feels much more real. It feels much more complex and challenging. Nora, it feels like more of kind of like a Hollywood production in a way that I don't really like, but it's still good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting because when I think of Sean Baker's work, a sense of location is so important to his films, and they so much capture the aesthetic of the place, and it feels so much as if not just this is an American film, but this is a film about this specific place and a specific time. I
I
mean,
don't think he captures that well in Honora, to be honest. There are some like cool little locations. Like she works at a strip club. The strip club is cool. Like that's
yeah,
like a good location that they spend a lot of time in. But other than that, again, it just kind of feels like they're, they're in New York City, okay.
yeah. I think New York City. I mean, I know films have to take place there because it is a place. Lots of people live there, but I don't know if there's a good way to capture New York City anymore. I mean, it's so ingrained in film at this point that shooting in New York City, it doesn't feel like there's
Yeah.
anything new to say about that city when there are so many
Yeah.
cities that so few films are shot in and are so
There's
much
some
more
good locations.
interesting.
Like at one point, like Anora goes home, so you see where she lives, and so you get to get a sense of what her life is like. And then she goes to the Russian kid's like home that he lives in. It's a big, ugly, rich person mansion. That's
Yeah.
kind of like an interesting, kind of like fun location. They're like good locations and like sets and buildings and homes and stuff like that. But it just doesn't really like resonate with me as well as like the really kind of gross,
Hmm.
kind of greasy, dirty, fucked up locations like in Red Rocket or even like in Tangerine, like the
Yeah.
Mexican restaurant that they go to or the guy selling
Hmm.
drugs or like the donut shop or the really kind of weird bar that like she sings at. All these locations feel like real locations like in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. In New York City, it just kind of feels like they're going from like rented set to rented set and I don't really like that all that much. It's still a good, solid, funny movie, and a lot of the supporting characters are really great too, by the way. Mikey Madison, she's good. Maybe not as good as Simon Rex, but a lot of like the supporting characters are really, really good. And one supporting character in Tangerine shows up. I wasn't expecting it. He shows up in Anora, and I was
Oh,
like, "Oh,
okay.
that guy's really great." He's the cab driver in
Oh,
Tangerine.
yeah.
He's in
Hmm.
Anora, and he's really, really good in the
Oh,
movie.
that's
Like he's
awesome.
he's in a lot of Anora. He's like one of the
Really.
main characters. He's really great. So yeah, I like that.
I think Sean Baker is a really interesting casting director. I mean, you look at all of his
Yeah, I
films,
agree.
and every now and then you'll have like one, maybe two big names, but his ability to find either no-name actors or actors who haven't done a lot of work
Yeah.
or
That Simon Rex casting is like one of the most inspiring castings I've ever seen for any movie that has come out in the past, 5 or so years. The
it's a
Mikey
great choice.
Madison casting, again, I like it. Like she's good. She really, really goes all out, but it's just not as inspiring to me as the Simon Rex casting. I love that character and I love that performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the Florida Project, which I remember at the time it was a really big deal that because this was still, it wasn't early on in social media, but it was definitely an earlier experience of an Instagram star, an influencer becoming an actor and choosing the actor. I'm trying to figure who it is. It's Brooklyn Prince, I think, right? No,
Yeah,
it's Brooklyn Prince,
he's
right?
got a few early movies I haven't got around to either. Like you mentioned, like a Starlet. I haven't seen that one. That's like an early
Starlet.
one I haven't got around to, but I will eventually.
For someone myself who has not actually seen that many Sean Baker films, I've only seen The Florida Project and
Yeah, he's got a lot of
Tangerine.
like early ones.
And I know he has quite a few films. Oh, well, he doesn't have a ton of films. A lot of his stuff are shorts. He has directorial debuts, four-letter words, and then he has a couple others. So he doesn't have a ton of films, despite having been making movies since 2000. So at
For
this
a
point,
little while, yeah.
I mean, been making movies for 24 years. He doesn't make movies very often. I mean, this is his first film since Red Rocket, which came out 3 years ago.
Something like
So
that.
yeah, 2021. I think Sean Baker, even though I've only seen so little of his work, he's one of my favorite working directors today because the work that I have seen of him is so fantastic.
I don't know if I feel that same way. Like I like Red Rocket a lot, but like I wouldn't feel that same way about Sean Baker. Like I don't really like get all that excited for his movies, even though I do think he's really good. That's just me though.
Yeah. And he's still got time. I mean, he's only made a couple of films, so there's plenty more to be said by
Yeah.
Sean Baker. He's not done making movies yet. So I love him. It's been a long time since I've seen Sean. I haven't seen a Sean Baker movie since I saw Florida Project in theaters because I saw
It's
Tangerine
too bad.
well
It's too
before.
bad he's a horrible Zionist, probably. He's a
Is
horrible
he?
Zionist. On his Twitter before they made it so that you couldn't look at people's likes anymore.
Yeah.
You used to have the ability to look at people's likes, now you can't do it anymore.
Hmm.
People saw that he liked some very, very right wing activists calling for the violent acts to be committed against, like, I think college protesters who were in support of like the end of
Of
the
course.
genocide in like
Jesus
Israel
Christ.
Palestine. And people were like, what the fuck? And then, like, of course, the likes were locked down. So now you can't like see what
Yeah.
he's like liked anymore, which probably was the best thing to happen to Sean, right? So that people can't look at his likes and like judge him. Because I don't think he's ever really said anything publicly about
None.
the situation. And I don't know, maybe it could have been a mistake or something like that. Liking tweets doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's still
Yeah.
kind of weird. He liked more than
It's definitely
one.
suspicious.
It's suspicious. So, if that is true, then that's too bad. Because yeah, that's definitely left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth. They were like horrible like tweets by again like by like right wing freaks about how terrible like these college protesters were from a handful of months ago. So
Well,
I don't know.
I'm just gonna live in ignorance and
Yeah, okay.
and just try not to
That's
think
fine.
about
Again, it
it.
doesn't really mean anything. And it's just Sean
necessarily.
Baker. Like he's just kind of like a film director. Like he's not like the president. But yeah,
Yeah.